Well, it's been a minute
Yeah,
um
it's been a moment.
since we've recorded this,
Ethan got back from his trip,
I got back from my journey across
the seven
Stacked was
seas.
Stacked was conquering the East this
Uh,
summer. Chris is still there, holding down the fort, and I was there in Japan. Um, but now we're back to Stacked episode 115.
Hmm.
A very special episode. Brandon, I'm gonna let you
Yes.
take it over from here
Yeah.
for a very, very special episode.
Joining us today is my father, Shawn Winchester.
Woo!
And it's special because today is his birthday.
Yes, happy
Yes.
birthday, Sean. Happy birthday.
thank you, guys.
Is this what you wanted for your birthday? It was to come talk movies with some guys,
Could be could be something else, but this is
you know.
This is fine. He said it's not
You get
disappointing.
to you get to see your son on your birthday. That isn't that just
Yeah.
even if he's on a tiny screen, in front of you, you get to have
Yeah.
sit
It's
down and
not
have some
that
heart to
small.
heart.
He doesn't have that small of a screen. He's got like 3 panels set up, man. You take my dad. You take my dad for a peasant? No.
I have a widescreen, 36-inch widescreen, so
Yeah.
I can see you guys pretty good. Which is good at my age,
Yeah. Well, Brandon,
Yes.
because your father's on, what are we talking about today? What are we doing? Who
well,
are you? Why are we here?
actually, a few weeks ago, my dad came to me and he's like, "Oh, Stack's going on hiatus. I noticed you guys haven't posted." And it was basically his idea to have a father-son movie episode. And an episode like he had came up with 2 episode ideas. I don't know if we'll do the second one, but it is a possibility. And so that's just a little teaser for our stackies out there, our little stackies. But I mean, father son movies. I mean, how perfect is it that it just landed on my dad's birthday that we could record this episode?
Yeah, that's great. Sean, I want to know in your fatherly opinion, what makes a father-son movie?
For me, when I was thinking about that, primarily I look at it from the perspective of usually how do you see dads and sons portrayed on screen, and there are a lot of specific films that really cover the gamut, right? From conflict to general relationship based on how old your son is and
Right.
how you work through your issues and that kind of thing. And what's kind of interesting when I was thinking about this is before I even had kids, I watched these films, but I think what I was looking at it from was the perspective of my relationship with my dad. And so when I'd see some things, it kind of made me think that, if I'm going to be a dad at some point in my life, how would I change relationship with my kids, and how could I be the best dad I could be? So, Brandon has told me in the past when we've talked, he thinks that, film can have a change. Film can make a change in people. And I really think that is true in that if you watch film where you see these relationships, you can actually see these dynamics occur, and so you have an opportunity to kind of look at that and say, do I look at those things, and should I, try not to do those things,
Right.
just to be the best, father you can be. So from my perspective, it's all about those relationships you see on screen. So.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the bit where I feel like in father-son movies, there's a lot that both the father and the son sort of learn from each other in these films. Usually it's always I think there's a stigma of the father is the teacher, but sometimes films show that it's no, we're all human, we all have things to teach each other, and yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get to some films right there. Brandon, do you want to start off with a father-son movie that we could talk about?
Yeah,
And sort of
absolutely.
why it is a pinnacle father-son movie for you?
Honestly, yes. Should I go back to childhood? I think I shall.
Let's take
The
it back, shall
first,
we?
let's take it back. I was thinking Star Wars: Return of the Jedi, uh,
Oh,
being a really interesting example of a father and son movie, because often when we're talking about the Star Wars franchise, it is centered around this father son dynamic between Luke and Anakin Skywalker, and one of the most interesting aspects is that relationship between them and their like how they parallel and differ in their worldviews. And it is really a tragedy in that sense, but it also is like a redemption story the way it
right.
ends, and it's what brings Vader back to the light a little bit and back to his senses. And I think that's a really compelling thing. I remember watching this as a kid and kind of being bored by the whole uh Luke and Vader like talking on Endor in the like space, not the space station, but that starport area. But as an
Right.
adult, like that is like just really compelling because it's like he's giving himself up. He's being vulnerable enough to talk to this very broken man inside of his dad, you know. And also it's like conveying like the two differing like paths that a father and son can go on, and how in the end there is still hope that they like reach the same agreement at some point.
Yeah.
So that was my first pick because it just comes back from childhood, you know.
Yeah, so Sean, did you ever see yourself in a Darth Vader role with Brandon? As he says this, I guess this was very relatable for his childhood.
No,
Let's
not
break this down.
relatable.
No,
I
let's
didn't say
let-
that.
No, but Sean, what do you think about Return of the Jedi? 'Cause I mean,
Uh,
it must have been. Did you see it in theaters
yeah,
when it came out?
I
Oh
did see it in theaters, which is
man,
really crazy.
that is so crazy.
And seeing the very first one in theaters when I was 9
Whoa.
was amazing. It was the first big kind of what was going to be a blockbuster that nobody knew about.
Right.
It was amazing. So, yeah, for me as a kid, seeing the second one, and then I am your father. It's like blew my mind. So,
Yeah.
that was unexpected, and I think. It was very different because you look at that and it's like he's like on a whole different path, divergent from where Luke has been, and you can see that Luke is struggling with the concept of that, but also that his anger is ridiculous and could lead him in the same path. So he really has to work it. So I do find that pretty interesting. I don't know that I would say that I felt like Darth Vader at any time.
No, I bet not. Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Unless Brandon remembers a certain time frame.
No,
Unless, did you ever like throw off like an old man off a ledge who was like electrocuting Brandon or something? As a sacrificial act.
no. He offered to like rule the galaxy with me, but that was like,
Yeah, right.
that was a different thing.
You're like, no, Dad, I got homework. I can't. All right, that's good. Good first pick. I mean, that is an iconic father-son duo. I feel like we couldn't really, talk about father-son movies without going with them. So Sean, give us a perfect father-son movie in your opinion.
So this one, I doubt you guys have seen this because this was in 1986. It was a movie called Dad. And,
Ted Danson.
Ted Danson, Jack Lemmon, and Ethan Hawke.
Oh, my namesake.
Ethan-
Love the guy.
Ethan Hawke is like maybe 16, 17, 18 in this film. Anyway, it's really interesting because obviously there's a relationship between three people here, right? You have the father, and then the son, and the grandson. And it's really about them kind of all being estranged because when the son leaves his father to go off, he's become a big businessman, and his father was a guy who worked for like Lockheed Martin. He was what he calls himself a worker in the film, and his son's like an executive, right? And but they are estranged because the guy goes off to pursue his career. Well, at the time he does that, he actually gets divorced, and of course now he's separated from his own son.
Mm.
Okay, so there's a lot of drama here, but I think what's the most interesting is that the movie actually starts out where the son comes back to visit his father because his mother had a heart attack,
Oh.
Hmm.
and the father is very incapable of taking care of himself. He's like in his 70s. Um, and he sees his dad in a whole different light, in a more weak perspective. Like time is ticking away, and he's just not able to care for himself as well.
Mm.
Um, and in this process, he begins to take a different look at life in terms of what's going on with his dad.
Mm.
Right? He's missed a lot of time, basically,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of things going on about him learning about his father and trying to get him out of this situation he's in where he seems so weak and not able to do things when really his mother's been taking care of his father, like doing everything for him, like everything, washing his clothes, cooking food, everything, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not that his father was incapable, but he has been so used to being taken care of, I think. But it was very interesting, and of course there's lots of twists and turns on this, which then comes back to reconciliation and a
Hmm.
reconciliation for all three. And you know, without spoiling it, the
Yeah.
reconciliation is it events happen that lead to this. So it's just a really good movie for that. And I usually don't get emotional during movies, but this one particularly was super
Yeah.
emotional. And
Oh,
I think,
sounds like it.
well, yeah, and I think as far as like, um, I think about my own dad and the, kind of our experience. There were some things that mirrored that experience. So when that happens, it's kind of an emotional thing. So
Absolutely. I haven't seen this one, but I love all three actors. Jack Lemmon as an old man, that's kind of crazy to me, because
yeah,
I've only seen him in like The
He looks
Apartment
like
and like
he's like
Some Like It Hot.
Statler and Waldorf
Yeah, he
in
kind
that.
of does. He's been kind of Muppet coded in this film. Um,
yeah,
yeah, but no, that is like such a fascinating sort of just element of the human condition to depict when you're showing someone's father who is now sort of facing their own mortality and age, and as like the son of this person, you've sort of looked up to this person as like your father,
The strongest.
the strongest, like
yeah,
in this patriarchal society, sort of like we have the idea that the father, he's the ultimate caretaker, the provider, the strongest one in the family. But now and then, once we see, age get the best of your father, as they do with all of us, it's sort of a surreal experience. I know I've somewhat experienced that, but I know my father has too, with his father. It's just a part of life. And I mean, this film sounds great. Sort of having sort of a 3 generation approach from it is also really cool. Um, I added it to the watch list. I'm
It was
excited to
on
check it out.
Netflix like 6 months ago.
Oh, really?
And I really wanted to watch it, but I just never got around to it, and they took it off Netflix. So
yeah.
just
You
goes
can
to show.
you can rent it now. You can rent it on Vudu or Amazon. So
Yeah,
There we
absolutely.
go.
Gotta see it. Brandon, what do you think?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it sounds like very grounded, not melodramatic, but very dramatic in what it's examining, and it realistic. Because, like you said, like you view your father in a certain way depending on like what kind of stages of life you've lived in, and or I feel like a teenager is going to look at their father differently than somebody who's a young adult, an adult, or as an elderly man looking back on your own father after like aging. You know.
Yeah.
So there is that perspective and that multi-generational like not it's not necessarily a diaspora, but that multi-generational like sort of perspective can lend to a lot of different nuance between like, okay, how am I viewing like my own self through the prism of this very natural concept, which is being a dad. being a paternal figure to somebody.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, I'll share my first pick. First little recommendation. So the way I sort of structured my picks is sort of like relationships between fathers and sons in stages of their life. So my first one is like sort of a father with a young son, you know, and I
Big
just watched this.
Daddy.
It's a Big Daddy. No, Daddy Daycare is my first one. No, my first pick is Kramer versus Kramer, actually.
Oh, good.
Which is, I think, I just, I'm going through all the Best Picture winners right now, going over to the library of Brandon Winchester and checking out my movies, watching a decade a month. So in June, I think it was June, I watched Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah, it was right before you went to Japan.
Right. And I was more expecting, sort of, it's a divorce film, Tori's been on the podcast. She's talked a lot about how much she loves this film. On our divorce movies episode. So I was sort of expecting sort of that to be the main driving plot line of that film, but what it really is, Dustin Hoffman's character, having to step up as a single father. And that's most of the movie, is him learning to like balance work life and taking care of his son. And sort of just capturing the most mundane things, that you don't really think about, if you're not a parent, like the morning routine, he struggles getting doing the morning routine, making breakfast and everything like that. Pickups, going to the playground, having to have hard talks with your kid at a very young age, that is an absolute skill you have to like learn as a parent, and I just think this is like such just such a nice emotional yet mundane film, that once Meryl Streep's character leaves in the beginning of the film, like you feel that there's like you feel her presence in every scene, even though she's not there, because it is basically telling you like, as I said, as a patriarchal society, sort of, we don't really expect the father to take care this much, because, there's a partner to help, but, when they're alone, we have to like take in everything, and, he loses his patience sometimes, they show that, yeah, parenting's an overwhelming task, especially just for one person. And I found it beautiful, and it just makes the ending all the more tragic, once Meryl Streep comes back and like they sort of just have to like figure out what's going to happen next, but yeah, fantastic film. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I don't think a lot of people realize or not realize, but I don't think a lot of people recognize the possibility of an absentee mother figure, because often in popular culture, it's definitely the man that is more so leaving because they're less attached to the child. There's less of that physical responsibility, even though the man is like as equally involved in the process of making a child.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think Kramer versus Kramer does like a really good job at like portraying that and giving the audience like a viewpoint into what it's like to be a single father who's like completely out of their depth. Because you see this in movies all the time, with movies where like a mom goes on vacation, like think recently like Incredibles 2 even, where Elastigirl picks up like a lot more of the superhero duties, and then Bob is stuck at home raising his kids.
Math is math. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it like that aspect is a little stereotypical, but it's not really taken seriously. It's often played for comedy.
Right.
Whereas here it's like almost incredibly stressful in a way that isn't played for comedy, and is more so like developing Dustin Hoffman as a more functional human being and father, beyond the fact of he has to support not only himself through his work, but also now do the stuff that, again, in a patriarchal society, more so is done by the matriarch of the family.
Right.
And that is super interesting, and it's very progressive, actually. And I really respect that, because my dad was basically a stay-at-home dad. Not that my parents are unhappy; they're very happy people.
Way to speak for them.
He's right
Shawn,
here.
are you happy? Speak for yourself.
I'm very happy.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
Okay, so here's the thing. I love that movie, by the way. I think it was really good. The biggest thing for me that shows is in a patriarchal society like this, there's always been this idea that being a mom at home is not a job.
Right.
It is a job.
Oh, yeah.
And being actually choosing to stay home with my kids was just purely financial. At the time, it was like we could, my wife and I could both work, and one of our salaries would go to daycare. That was basically the deal. So we decided we'd rather raise our kids, one of us being home, and basically have a say in just how they grow up. And she had the job that didn't require 70 hours a week of work. And so I started my own little company and just kind of did work as I could. But the focus was on the kids. Now, part of this also comes from making a choice as a father to be the father you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that perspective, it was a change for me from my history with my dad that I really wanted to be involved with my kids. So it kind of served a couple of different purposes. And yeah, I got to learn all the stuff that mom would do, right? And it is not easy, by the way, to learn how to do girls' dance hair, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Since Cassie was involved with ballet and all that, she'd have to be prepped for every practice. So I learned how to do dance buns and things like that. And I'm like, it must have been the weirdest thing for these moms to walk in and see a dad doing all this hair stuff and whatever. But it was easier with the boy, of course.
Oh, yeah.
You can be my baseball coach.
Yeah, we could
Have a catch.
We can coach. Yeah, we can coach, and we can do the stuff at the school, right? I volunteered at the school and did computer club and stuff like that. So it put me in a whole different perspective. So
right.
It was
and I'm
cool.
sure you learned so much about yourself, and your own limited stuff. Because I think that's what I love the most about Kramer vs. Kramer is because Dustin Hoffman's character has to go through this and take up this responsibility for himself. He sort of has to put his own life in perspective,
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it's an admiring thing to do,
Yeah.
So Stacked, we endorse the stay-at-home dads. That's gonna be our slogan.
Yeah.
I think it gets the official seal.
Slap
of
it on
approval.
the screen. Don't actually you don't have to do this.
All right, but yeah, great movie. Brandon, you want to kick us off with another one?
Yeah, I was going to talk about something that we don't really get to see a lot in movies. Or I think in terms of father and son movies, sometimes the father and son don't have a really good relationship or don't have a relationship at all.
Yeah.
So let's give a shout out to all the surrogate fathers out there.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
People who act more as a parental figure. In my mind, and I wouldn't say the whole movie is focused on this paternal relationship, but it is definitely a main aspect of its second half. And I'm going to go with Bruce Willis and Sham Tchaikovsky. I forget his name, but he's famous on Twitter. Jared Gilman, I think. Moonrise Kingdom. That relationship between.
Oh wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, because in this movie, the first half is this kid runs away from home because his parents are always fighting. He feels insignificant. I think they don't really want him, and they might have passed away. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember this aspect of the movie because he runs away from home and he finds himself more connected to this young girl at the summer camp that he is living across, essentially. And when his parents pass away, he is like almost threatened with this idea of leaving childhood too soon, because he doesn't have a strong figure in his life, and the strong figure ends up being this very lonely cop on this like small island, in which he endorses all of the small things that he does, and gives him the opportunity to have his like first sip of adulthood, which is like a sip of alcohol at the table. But like, it's a mutual respect when a father does that with his son. And not only that, I think he serves a purpose in guiding Sam through this chaotic, turbulent time, as the people around him are trying to develop him into whatever they want him to be, because he doesn't have a father.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be incredibly fascinating, because in movies, yes, fathers try to fashion themselves, or fashion their children after them. Sometimes it's obvious and plain to see. I think of like something like Billy Elliot, where the father in that movie wants to take his son and make him into like a financially profitable person for their family,
Right.
and be in the coal mines with him and his brother, instead of the dancer that he wants to be. And he's not fostering that until the very end of that movie. But in Moonrise Kingdom, it feels like there's this support. Like, yes, he wants him to be safe and doesn't endorse the relationship with the girl that he meets.
Mm-hmm.
But on the same token, he is at least open to the idea of hearing the kid out and treating him like an adult. Because I think often, maybe kids aren't as respected by their parents, because they don't view them as intellectually equal, but they are. So
Is there some sort of undertone that I'm?
Also, my dad. I know I presented all poor relations. I am getting to the good ones. I swear to God. I swear, because my dad treated me like an equal, and I think more.
And that's how you can recognize this stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Wes Anderson. He's sort of like, he's got some daddy issues, because there's a lot of like.
Royal Tenenbaums,
Life Aquatic.
Yeah.
I would say even Grand Budapest Hotel has a surrogate father in that, you know?
With the concierge and
his bellboy.
Lobby boy. Yeah.
His lobby boy, yeah. Keep your hands off my lobby boy. And even in Asteroid City.
Yeah, I just was going to say, that looks very similar.
Yeah.
There's a lot more father issues in that movie, too.
Yeah. But sort of there, you know, the surrogate father, sort of, I don't know if I'd call it a trope, or, you know, I don't know, element that's shown off in a lot of films. It really shows, sometimes it shows, it gives characters a way of learning how to take care of themselves by taking care of someone else. If that makes any sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we see sort of Bruce Willis in this film as, like you said, a very lonely cop who works just as a cop in this very tiny island. And once he starts being a surrogate father to this kid, he starts to have a bit more, there's a bit more action to his character. He's sort of, you know, self-actualization, you know, that occurs when he's put into a position of becoming a caretaker, you know, which I think is also a very fascinating thing that I do think you see a lot in and outside the frame of the film, you know? Yeah. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, I did get that same thing from watching the film. And I think always in those situations, I wonder if the person who takes on the father role sees something in that child about himself, that creates the kind of the connection. And so I don't know, it's kind of like caring about that child maybe in a way that he wasn't cared for himself. So he takes on the role to try to maybe change this kid's life in some way. I think you do see that in a lot of film.
Yeah.
A lot of times you see a lot of like guys that are used to being single, and they end up in like with a girlfriend who has a child, and there's this dynamic of, I don't know if I want to, you know, take this fatherly role on, but a lot of times they do, you know,
Right.
and then it becomes like their learning situation. So it's very interesting. So
Or like the lone wolf and cub sort of trope, you know. You
yeah,
see it.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
like even the Mandalorian, that's a good father son story.
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
But that's not a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just sort of like learning. They do it a lot with with characters who are like, I'm better off alone, you know,
Mhm.
and they realize that sort of because we are social creatures, we do sort of need like this responsibility over others to find satisfaction in life, you know.
Maybe it'll soften their edges a little bit
Yeah.
in a way that's unexpected.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Shawn, do you want to share another film that you got?
Yeah. So this one, okay, this is actually a series of films, but the relationship between the father and son in all of these is so important to me
Yeah.
because it shows unconditional love no matter what. And that is the American Pie series.
What?
Eugene Levy,
Eugene Levy and
Jason Biggs.
Jason Biggs.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because you can have a father that really like comes down on you about doing stuff that it's just stupid shit, or you make mistakes all the time, and you can have, but Eugene was such a funny person to say basically it's okay, everybody makes mistakes. You know?
It just so happens that all of his like adult mistakes are on screen for us to enjoy.
You're right. But I just found that one of the most endearing things about the films. I mean, they're fun films, right? But as far as that relationship between those two, it is so funny, and just counteract that with the mom and how she reacts. It is totally hilarious. But I just think that relationship, and it actually in the last, well, when he's getting married, all of that, as he grows, that relationship changes. You know, as he's becoming more of an adult. But I find that relationship just was it kind of grew through the number of films. I from a perspective of just a nice presentation, I love that. Just what a father will be willing to put up with, or willing to, you know, not bring his kid down.
Right.
Always being a positive experience, that kind of thing. I just love that.
It's almost like there's no judgment from
Yeah.
Eugene Levy in that movie. Even when he like has sex with a pie or glues his, did he glue his hands to his pubes in the second one or third one?
Well, his you know, his
Yeah. Yeah.
his member.
Yeah. That's so, and there's an openness that like I think these films get that I think a lot of sex comedies don't get.
Mm-hmm.
Because often it's between the bros, you know, or the girls, but it's never between like a father and son. You know, it's not the
Right.
focus of the film, of course.
Right. No,
but
no.
it is a big element of all four films, actually.
Well, he always shows up. That's
Yeah.
the other thing I think is important in that film is Eugene Levy always shows up. Takes him to the hospital, talks to the doctor, tells him the situation, so the doctor prescribes some cream for him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just classic. I mean, so anyway,
Well, I haven't seen a single one of these. I'm gonna admit
Oh.
here. So, you know, but I'm gonna take both of your words for it that it's good father son movies. That's not something I would have expected by looking at by hearing the log lines of those movies, but
yeah, right.
I'll give it the benefit of the doubt.
Well, now you have more reason to check it out, Ethan.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Okay. So my next film, I'm gonna be going with another Best Picture winner.
Of course. And I'm just giving you all these, right?
You're just giving me all these. I'm gonna
like-
yeah, whatever. Actually, you didn't give me this one because
Really?
I watched it on the plane on the way back.
Because
from
I was
Japan.
gonna give it.
You were gonna give it
to
to
you.
me, but then I saw that they had it on the plane, and
You
that
were
was
like-
a big mistake.
I
My
know.
next film is Ordinary People.
So good.
which is yeah, that was not a good movie to watch condensed with a bunch of people around me, because I was like, I don't want to be weeping like a baby in front of all these people on the way back while they're trying to sleep, you know. They're already incredibly jet lagged. But I went into this film not knowing like anything about it. And what I got was a film that's like about such an important like subject matter for me personally, which is just about uh you know, men and their ability to open up about how they're feeling, you know, and they do it through a father and a son who equally struggle with that, you know, but for different, you know, but they do it in different ways, you know. So, you know, the film is about, um, uh, you know, a boy who's, his brother passed away in a boating accident. They're a rather wealthy family, and sort of he later on he attempts suicide, and you know, and the movie's sort of him like coming back from the hospital and him sort of having to navigate life, his family, you know, the relationship between his mother but also his father, and it's also about, you know, the parents and their you know, their way of sort of like trying to get some normalcy back in their lives, you know. um and the reason why I would call this specifically a father and son movie, because while yes, there is, you know, I feel like there is an important relationship between the son and the mother in this film. Um, it is really about you know, the father and son, these two men learning to uh, open up to each other, which is something that I feel like is very taboo in our culture. You know, about having dads and their sons really like open up about their feelings and stuff. You know, that's seen, for some reason it's seen as a very like feminine thing for, you know, for people to come together and talk about their feelings and stuff like that. Like for some reason groups of men, they don't do that, you know. And it's just gone back to the signal where we've been talking about throughout the episode, where, you know, men are supposed to be the strong ones, they're not supposed to show emotion, you know. But this film, directed amazingly by Robert Redford, sort of shows that like, you know, the mother just wants to go back to normalcy, you know, and sort of it takes the father and the son. They have to realize that there is no going back after what they've experienced, you know, and it's about them learning that they have to like recognize that things have changed, that they've changed, you know, and what are the best courses of action to not really get back the lives that they had, but now make lives better with what they have now. And yeah, it was such an amazing movie. Even though it's a father son movie, I think Mary Tyler Moore has like the best performance in it. I think just the scene at the end, you know, where I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but when everything sort of comes to a conclusion, just like her sort of having to grapple with that was just, it was heartbreaking, you know. Um, and just the, you know, the final shot between the father and the son, that's really what cemented it as a father son movie for me, you know. um but yeah, I feel like it's a very before its time film, I feel. You know, because I know there's a lot of these issues are being talked about now, you know. I feel like I think even the Barbie movie has helped a lot, you know, with, you know, with Ken saying you are enough, you know, and having to, you know, I think men are sort of taking that message and being like, yeah, we need to like, you
Some
know,
men.
we need to talk about them. Yeah, the smart men are who see that movie, you know.
The dumb men
Like,
are saying,
the dumb men are
"I
like,
this is
well, whatever.
they hate me. Women hate me."
Women hate me. No, they love you. They want you to be fucking better. That's what this movie's about. But you know, so it's good to see that stuff sort of coming into um, the greater talking spaces. But back in 1980 when this film came out, I just, you know, just comparing it to past Best Picture winners, you know, it's very, very ahead of its time. You
Well,
know.
we have the perspective of somebody who was alive during that time, so we can
Yes.
ask, what was it like to
So,
talk
So
to your
Shawn, yeah,
dad?
what was it like?
well, I mean, in this particular case, let me talk about the movie a little bit.
Yeah.
At that time, with suicide being extremely misunderstood, I would say, thing. you come from a religious background that says is you can't, that's just something you can't do.
Right.
And yet it denies kind of the aspects of the emotional strain that the person's under, right? So I think that a lot of people didn't see it, didn't see the film. I mean, not your regular person. I think it was because it was deep, it was dark, but in the perspective of talking with your dad, you didn't. You did. It was very much of you're seen, but don't try to put too much into the discussion.
Right.
And there wasn't. Yeah, you didn't. All families are different, but I think there can be some emotional aspects where it's some good emotional relationships, but there are things that don't get talked about. I mean, they're just it, and there's a lot of let's just forget it ever happened.
Right.
And that just means that even if it's traumatic, I think we have a much better understanding now of what trauma is and that it stays with people. I think once it happens to you, it stays with you. It's not like you just get to release it and it's gone.
Yeah.
That's become part of your life. And if it's part of your life, at some point, you will have to deal with that just to keep your own sanity, because it just surfaces. Things will surface from that period in your life. And so, when people say, I just want it to go back to the way it was, an event changes your life forever, no matter what it is. And so, but everybody wants things to be going backwards to these, what they perceive as better times, safer times. And it's like, well, that's not life.
Yeah. And also sort of like that is also sort of like them wanting like a status symbol, especially in this film where it's like Mary Tyler Moore, she wants to uphold a certain social status within the film, like, because she doesn't want her husband talking about like her son and his troubles, like at the dinner parties, and stuff like that.
Of course. Oh, that was a big thing, by the way. During that time, people didn't want the family stuff to ever be heard outside the family. You always kept that in the dark because it was seen as a negative. I think it was a status issue, weakness. Seeing weakness in a family, I think, was not something that people wanted other people to know.
Yeah.
If you live in a small town, it's a gossip mill. So if things like that get out, then it can turn into just a ridiculous kind of thing. So, but yeah, I grew up in that environment where it's like something happened in the family. It's like, no, you don't speak about that.
And I think in the movie you kind of have that like split dichotomy between the father viewing it that way, and not the father viewing it, the opposite of that, but the mother kind of wanting to move past it and trying to keep everything under wraps or keep everything normalized, right?
Right.
Whereas the father is trying to move on with the least amount of things happening as possible to damage his family further, But unfortunately, the way it goes is quite negative for both sides, I think.
Yeah. And it's just
tragic.
It's a heartbreaking film.
Yeah,
But also
great.
It's heartbreaking, but also like kind of beautiful by the lessons that it's teaching,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's great. Brandon, let's do another film. What do you got?
I got Frequency. Frequency. Have you heard of this one?
I almost brought that one up.
Yeah,
Frequency.
Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel. Sound of Freedom, fellow. No, we're not talking about that.
How dare you? How dare you even bring up its name? All right. What is this film about? I don't know what it's about. What is it about?
It is a butterfly effect time travel movie.
Oh,
Um,
time travel.
Oh, don't you know me?
I do know you quite well,
I
actually.
I should have presented this like I was going to talk about Time, but because that's also a great father-son movie.
That is.
But I'm bringing up Frequency because it's different from that. There is a father who is a firefighter and one day goes in to try to rescue two people from a burning building because of an electricity fire, and he doesn't get out alive, and his young son and wife live as like widows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a widow and orphan, essentially. And like 30 years later, the young son has grown up. He's an adult male. He's struggling in his own relationship with his girlfriend. And it all stems back to the trauma of him losing his father at such a young age. And then one day he finds like an old ham radio in his like friend's garage or something, and he wants to like fix it up. And so he gets on it and he's like, oh, I'm going to like talk to some people, like truck drivers on the road or something like that, to try to connect, to see like if it really is him. And he ends up talking to this guy, and they're talking about the 1969 World Series where the Miracle Mets won, you know? And
Mets, baby. Gotta love the Mets.
And he realizes that it sounds like this person is like recalling these details as if it was yesterday, and it ends up that he's talking to his dad in 1969, the day before he dies. And so he's like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Because any person who's seen a time travel movie knows I don't mess with time, because time tends to either mess back or you don't know the intended effect that will have, because as a human being who only lives in like 4 dimensions, you can't really know the repercussions of your own actions and how that would affect the world around you.
Yeah.
And essentially he does tell his dad what's going to happen, because they reconnect like that. And the dad is able to get out of the event that kills him. And so there are two disparate timelines going on here, with both Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel's character sort of conflicting, because there's an emotional conflict going on, because it's like, do you best let sleeping dogs lie and let your father pass away because that's what was meant to happen? Or do you try to prevent that because you never really had a good relationship with him in the first place because you didn't know him when you were a kid?
Yeah.
And it's really poignant in that way, because it's asking a really great philosophical question about how we react to trauma and how we could go back and change it. If we could go back and change it, what kind of effect would that have?
Right.
And I love that. And I love that aspect of the film. And I'm not going to say where it goes, because it's kind of loopy in what happens. But I think what it is saying is very compelling and beautiful. And it's also one of those movies from another 30 years ago, where it isn't afraid to have these very masculine men connect. You know, there is this natural bond they have, and it's so hard to, because it's not genetic. You know, it's not like Caviezel and Quaid are related or anything, but it feels like it is. It does feel like they are father and son, and that they have a close dynamic, even if they're only talking over the radio. And so it makes that reconnection so much more heartwarming in the end. So,
whoa.
Yeah.
So they only talk to each other over the radio?
I won't say much more than that, but
okay.
I think you need to watch it, Ethan.
Keep your secrets then. All right. Shawn,
not
have you
Gandalf.
seen? You were gonna pick for. Is that you said you were gonna pick? You were gonna.
It was on my.
Considered it?
It's on my. It was on my list. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was that unique kind of thing, you know. If you can talk to your father from the past,
or from the dead, you know,
or from the dead, basically. Yeah, that's the thing. It's very interesting. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, if you had that ability, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
And so from that perspective, it was a very interesting way to see this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a long time since I've seen that, so I can't even remember how it ended. So I just remember the concept and how interesting it was. So,
well, all right, yeah, I gotta check this out. Cool time travel movie.
Yeah.
Okay, Shawn, let's get into our final picks here. What do you got?
So Brandon already said it. About Time is my
Hey,
quintessential.
okay. There we
Hey.
go.
Yeah, I would have to say About Time. That is a relationship that I wanted Brandon and my relationship to be like.
Mm.
I wish we could do the time travel bit because that would be totally awesome.
Right.
You could read all the
But,
books you want, Dad.
Yeah, it's very genuine. It was a very genuine relationship. I really liked that,
Yeah.
and it just, I mean, his dad had the ability to replay stuff and do things and get them the way he wanted them to get them. Unfortunately, as parents, we don't have that ability, you know. So you got one shot. So seeing that film though, it just I just love the fact that that relationship was there. So
Mm-hmm.
it does show that I think that you can have that kind of relationship where you can talk to each other about anything pretty much. I mean, they talked about everything. And uh, and you could be a support for each other, um, and just not be afraid to be that way.
Right.
And I think from that perspective, it may look like a more modern approach to relationship between men. You know,
Mm-hmm.
after there's the boy and the man, but then there's the man and the man.
Right.
As the son gets older. So um, I really appreciated where that went.
Yeah.
So
That relationship is very well written because it's like how how do you write a parental figure who has the ability to fix all their mistakes and have the child have the ability to fix all of their mistakes, you know? It's
Right.
it's a whole new layer, I feel like, of parenting that film had to talk about, you know?
hmm
Um which, you know, you don't really think this film's gonna be a father son film in the beginning. You just sort of you see Bill Nye's character as like, oh, he's the one who who he's the exposition explainer guy. You know, he's like now you can travel through time. You know, you go back in time and go in the closet, and that sends Donald Gleason through all these predicaments. But then towards the end of the film, when it comes to like uh sort of it takes a more existential turn, um between a father and son being like, I like it's hard, it is hard to imagine a world without your dad, and like uh because they've always been sort of that mentor figure, that the one to lead you, even when you have the ability to fix your own mistakes, they still have that status, um and yeah, it made for a really touching and killer ending.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon, I know this is one of your all-time favorites too.
Yeah. I mean, I worked at the library when I was a kid, and this was like, I remember checking this out because we had no late fees or whatever, and I liked the poster. I liked Rachel McAdams at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a sick day for me, and I remember watching this back to back with Good Will Hunting.
Whoa.
And I was just bawling that day. And I remember finishing the movie and going, my dad was working in his back office because we mentioned like he was a stay-at-home dad, and I hugged him and he's like, what is that for? Yeah. And I said, oh, I just wanted to hug you, and this movie is really good. And then I would go on to show everyone in my family this film,
Yeah.
as I could, and recommend it to everyone I see, because it is sentimentality and fluffy and stuff like that, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's a movie that is a sneaky one, because on the surface it is like a comedy, light romantic comedy about a guy who's trying to find the girl of his dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the back half there is, again, a lot of philosophical arguments being made here about like, how do you live your life? How do your relationships change over time? Right. And especially the father-son one in the film, because it's like you said, Dad, it's like it goes from being a man to a boy, like, you know, him conveying this information on his like 21st or 18th birthday, and that's like his kind of a gateway into manhood. It is a very interesting thing, because it is giving him agency as a human being to make the changes and to fix it. And it's very hard to write characters like that, like you said, Ethan, but that makes it more interesting because it's in the difficulty and then the challenge that they're able to come up with something so creative.
Right.
And I think even in the first half, like the father is very prevalent, you know, even when it is focused on Rachel McAdams and his relationship, you can see these small like shots, cutaways to Bill Nighy's character reacting to the fact that he knows his son has been time traveling in this moment and that this isn't the first time he's done this, or that it's really important that she meet his family and his father. And then in the end, it's like the relationship that like really ties the whole group together. You know, it's that they're all happy when he's happy. They're all sad when he's sad, or yeah. But there are so many scenes that speak to me, but that ping pong scene in particular just really got to me when I was a kid. It just, wow. Yeah. Hit me like a ton of bricks.
Like a ton of bricks.
I think mine was actually, well, wasn't that one they went back to where he and his son were on the beach?
Yeah, when he was a kid, and they were skipping stones, and it's so simple. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
I remember our foreign exchange student at the time, Akash. Yeah. I showed him this movie. Oh boy, his critique he got, because he was like, "This is not better than Dead Poets Society," and I was like, "Oh, why?" And he's like,
"Were you comparing them? Like, why?
No, we just watched
reference here." Oh, okay, you watched them.
We watched them within a short period of time, and it was like one of my favorites. I'm like, "Oh, I think you'd really like this movie if you like this one." And then he got mad because I said it was better. And the reason he was like, "It doesn't make sense. The time travel rules don't make sense. Like, why did he go back? How could they go back in time and not change the thing that far back? Because the whole point is like if they can't go back before a child is born because it could ruin everything. It could change the child completely." But I'm like, in that moment, I don't think they're like, "Oh, every stone you skip has to be skipping the exact same you want to." But I didn't have a way of vocalizing that as a teenager, so I just was like, fine, doesn't matter. Go into my room.
Yeah.
But I just think it's so good.
Well, and I think really the ending in the whole context of the movie, I do believe it comes down to understanding that you have choices. And you make the choices the best choices you can to give yourself the best life that you can. And I think that's really true when his dad told him, I want you to take the same day and repeat it different ways. You know,
yeah, because he gives him guidance throughout the movie.
He gives him guidance. Yeah.
Right.
So if you repeat the same day in different ways, you get to see your impact and how you feel. And I think that was really important because that's like, who gets that? Who gets to see that visual, right?
Yeah.
Of you're having a crappy day and you have these interactions and they're all bad, but you don't get to see if you had changed your thought process and entered that day differently, how that would change. So I think that was really good because that's kind of a you get the opportunity to react to any situation in the way that could actually make your day better, even if it looks like it's going to be crappy, right?
And
so
it's like Meryl Streep's influence in Kramer versus Kramer. Like, even when Bill Nighy's character isn't on screen, his impact is felt because he introduces the audience and by proxy Tim, you know,
right,
to these ideas. And his impact, that's why I'm like, he's such a big character in the movie, even if he's like not the focus, because he's not the protagonist. And I love that.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, great. I'm glad we talked about this one because I know this is near and dear to your heart, Brandon. You know, this film, this motion picture. All right,
motion picture.
Okay, so we're just over an hour here. I'll share one last film, and then we can go around and do some honorable mentions, and then we'll wrap it all up. I feel like a great way to end this episode. We started with a classic father son. I think we got to end it with a classic father son. I think this is the ultimate father and son duo in cinema, even more than Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and that is Henry Jones Sr. and Henry Jones Jr. from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It absolutely incredible duo. I think one of the best castings of a duo ever with Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. I recently rewatched this film. It is my favorite Indiana Jones film. I rewatched it for the new one, and it like there's just so much more you pick up on in this relationship between the two when you get older. You know, it's just there's so much intertextuality between Sean Connery, being the father of Harrison Ford, with James Bond being the father of Indiana Jones, and just sort of like the way it talks about history and preservation of history and sort of, an older way versus a newer way, where we see Henry Jones Sr. He was so wrapped up in the quest for the Holy Grail. It took over his entire life that he wasn't able to be the dad that he should have been to Indiana Jones, and sort of the film's sort of a reconciliation with that. And both of them have to learn, lessons of being able to not get caught up in their love for archaeology and work, and it just comes to, just such a great scene at the end of the film, where Indy's trying to reach for the Holy Grail, and Henry Jones Sr. is just like, son, let it go, son. Just don't pick up the Grail and just come up off the cliff, and it's just great, There, of course, there's another, there's more elements that father son in this film, them sleeping with the same woman, it's not really
Yeah.
seen in many films.
Eskimo Bros.
Yeah. No, Tunnel Brothers. Never mind. I'm not bringing that part up. But yeah, I feel like I had to talk about this because whenever I think of a father and a son in a film, I think of these two. What do you guys think? Last Crusade. It speaks for itself.
I mean, it works. It works for me. It added a lot of comedy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the pairing. I think it was really good. I think they worked really well together.
Yeah.
In that, and you could actually feel that. You could believe that. That was a very believable father-son relationship to me.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of Indiana Jones, so that's just besides,
I know how you'll feel about the new one.
So when that film
I don't
came
know.
out, Sean, was it it a big deal that Sean Connery was Indiana Jones's dad, or like what was it like learning that when? Do you remember in 1989?
It was very interesting because we're used to him as James Bond,
Yeah.
and I think the thing is how's that going to work, But it really, it came off well. I mean, seeing the caliber of actors together like that though,
Mm-hmm.
it was a big deal,
Yeah.
Anytime you had an opportunity to see Sean Connery play something besides James Bond, it was actually interesting because he got to kind of break out of that, out of that character.
Right.
So it was good. And him being older in this sense, it was very interesting because, James Bond, all action,
Yeah.
and this, he's more an academic. And so,
Right.
yeah, it was really good.
Brandon, what do you think?
I haven't watched this movie in years, so I just remember the end where he's telling him to let it go.
Yeah.
I think that's a great scene because I feel like the whole movie, I feel like they're almost struggling to connect because though they are similar in a lot of ways, I mean, most fathers and sons, especially if they're distant in that case, from when they were growing up to when they were adults, they might struggle with that coming back together element because one feels abandoned by the other, and they kind of touch on that in the new one, just not as well. And I
Yeah.
think that's the lack of the magic done by James Mangold versus Steven Spielberg.
Right.
But that bickering is nice and fun, but it's really that end when they really come to an understanding that's beautiful. And everybody always agrees that the final shot is one of the best of Spielberg's entire career. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's just communicates everything so poetically.
Yeah, they basically like it's so some of the best scenes are when you're like, wait, these two guys, even though they've been so strange, they're so similar. You know, one of my favorite scenes is when they're in the plane dogfight, and his dad's in the gun seat, and he shoots down his own plane. He's like, "Son, I hate to say it, they got us." It's so good. And it's just like. Because it's weird for me. Like, I knew Sean Connery as Henry Jones Sr. before I knew him as James Bond. So now going back, I'm like, oh wait, he's all young. But yeah, I bet like when everyone saw him in Last Crusade, like, oh whoa, he's all old now, you know.
And he's shot the tail off his plane.
Yeah,
he would have done that.
Bond, yeah, Bond has a perfect day. What are you talking about? He would have done that. Yeah. He's using his umbrella to take down a plane with seagulls. All right. Yeah, just wonderful film. I think that's a good way to end our discussion. But before we end the show, there's a lot of father-son movies. I bet you guys have some honorable mentions you want to shout out. Brandon, do you want to throw out some films?
In the Name of the Father, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. That's a good one. Field of Dreams, Hugo, Fences for a really intense father-son dynamic.
Right.
Elf, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Hook, Avatar: The Way of Water.
That's father's sons. There's lots of sons.
Yeah. Pursuit of Happiness was up there for me.
Oh, I bet Chris would have picked that if he was here.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna do this because Evelyn will kill me if I don't mention it. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
Oh, yes! That's so good! Yeah, very good timely pick. That is a great father-son movie. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Great film. I got, let's see, 4. I got a few intense ones. I was gonna pick The Road as one, just, as the father, like, risking it all to, like, just protect his son, having to face the absolute worst. I think Ad Astra is also a good father-son film. What? That movie's all about like an older an older man having to face like his father, who has sort of lost his way. I think that's what that whole film's about, learning to be able to, like, you can't, there are like some dads who like are just too caught up in their old ways, and you just like, you have to let go of that, there's only so much fighting, and that's what the film's about. And I'm like, that's a great father-son dynamic.
It was on my little list, my honorable mentions list, but I was like, it's so negative. It's the most negative movie.
Well, I mean, we're not saying this is like, these are just father and son movies. They could be bad. Like, another one I had was There Will Be Blood. That's another. I wouldn't say that's the best father-son relationship.
He's the father of the year, in my opinion. Just kidding.
So yeah, I had those ones, and then last one I'm going to talk about is a film that got a very limited release this year, called The Eight Mountains. It's an Italian film. Brandon hates the Italians. I can't believe it. Sean, you never had any Italian exchange students, and
we did actually.
You did? Is that why you hate Italians? Was that?
No.
Okay.
We had one.
But it was after I was.
It was after you started your hatred. Okay. But this is like, it's about a film about just like, you see this man grow up from being a boy and hiking with his father through these giant mountains in the Alps in Italy, and sort of him not really appreciating his dad's mentality of why he goes on these big daring like expeditions up these mountains, and sort of him relearning that sort of when he gets older and his dad has passed away, sort of relearning that sort of energy towards viewing life and everything. And his goal is to like go on every hike that his dad never finished, before he died. It's a beautiful film. One of my favorites of this year. Very limited release. Hopefully it gets some attention during award season when it talks about like best, international film. But anyways, those are my honorable mentions. Shawn, do you have any? Because there's so many.
Yeah. I mean, and this is not just a father-son, but it's father-children, and that's Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, a father who goes the full extent.
Yeah.
To maintain connection with his children. That was really good.
We're his goddamn kids too.
That's right. And I did have The Pursuit of Happiness, Brandon said. There's one that I actually, from kind of a different perspective, is The Birdcage.
Yes. No, that is a great father-son film. Yes, that absolutely
totally
is.
Amazing that these guys take every effort to change their lifestyle just for their kid. Son.
Yeah.
It's very classic. I love it.
Yeah, that's a great film.
Great film. Animated film Finding Nemo is the son search, or the father search for the son motif, and it's really good. How that...
Helicopter parent.
Yeah.
Nemo.
So yeah, those are ones. I mean, there's so many films that have that father-son thing. I mean, this simple like Liar Liar with Jim Carrey.
Oh yes, and that's like him having to learn to be there for his kid, the hard way, where he can't lie anymore.
Yeah. So there are just a ton.
Lego Movie.
Yes, the Lego Movie. I think that is so great. And I think that's going to be a
fathers.
movie that I'm really going to have to learn when I'm a dad, because I'm going to be Will Ferrell in that movie. I'm going to be like, I'm going to buy you Legos, but we're going to build it by the instructions, okay? And I'm going to glue this shit together. And I'm going to have to learn that lesson when I'm older. I know that for a fact.
Boyhood, come on. I think Big Sick with the father-in-law sort of relationship he has with Ray Romano is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because, it's very interesting stuff. I mean, all quintessential, but unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about all of them.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's so sad.
So let us know in the comments below, what are your favorite father and son films? I would like to give a very special thank you to Shawn Winchester for coming on the podcast. Yes.
Thank you, Dad.
For being the father of Stacked. At least a third of it, I guess. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Thanks. That's a great way to spend a birthday.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy birthday once
Happy
again.
Birthday.
Brandon, we're gonna have to get your mom on now for mother and son movies. And then we'll get we'll get Cassie on too for.
Why can't we get any of
movies?
your siblings or parents, huh? Your dad doesn't want to join us?
Because they don't have microphones. That's the. I mean, technically, Chris's dad was on the show. Remember that when Chris called him?
Yeah.
And he didn't know who Batman was, or he didn't know who Bruce Wayne was, or something. I don't remember.
It's like, who was that?
But yeah, parents will always be an integral figure to this podcast. We wouldn't be anywhere without our mothers and our fathers. So that wraps up for this episode of Stack. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, comment your favorite videos down below. We're back. We'll try to be. I mean, Chris comes back on Monday, I think. Oh, he comes back on Monday, so we'll be getting back to our normal uploading programming. Thank you all so much for listening. Brandon, would you sing me some Cat Stevens to sign off the podcast, please?
It's some time to make a change. Just relax.
Take it easy.
easy.
Shut up. All right, cut. That's a wrap.